Hi, good evening class, and welcome to Catering Week 5 lecture. This week we're going to talk about equipment and facilities. Now, you plan to start your own catering operation. You might already have your own restaurant, you might have nothing to start with. So you got to start thinking about how are we going to stock our operation. So there's a couple things you've got to be thinking about. Is one, equipment, and that's the first thing people always think of. I've got to have stoves and ovens and all those types of things, and mixers and charbroilers and salamanders and griddles, and you get the idea. But there's also a whole bunch of other things that potentially you might need to have. For example, what are you going to do for china? What are you going to do for linens? What are you going to do for chafing dishes? Those really nice things that hold the food hot. What about cold displays to keep cold food cold? Are you going to need any of that? It really just kind of depends on what you're going to do. For example, we can go buy a chafer online, and I included a website on this week's lecture where you can go and look at the price of some of the catering equipment. And you can pay $500 to $600 for a chafer, one of those really nice metal pieces that hold a hotel pan full of food. Or I could go to Walmart and I could spend $10 and I could buy a disposable wire rack chafer with a disposable pan that goes in it. Why is one sufficient for one job and the other one better for another? Well, say I was doing a barbecue only catering operation where all I did was go out to somebody's property and put on a barbecue meal for companies, 25 people and up. I bring plastic plates, plastic silverware, I bring disposable chafers, I bring paper table runners that I would just lay out on the tables that we bring, I guess. We're going to rent them those tables. And everyone has a good old-fashioned time. Compared to the caterer that's maybe doing the fancy $200 a person catering, complete with music, complete with entertainment. We only serve the freshest and most expensive ingredients. Our prices start at $200 a person and up per wedding. We're booked 3 years in advance. There I'm probably not going to be using chinette. And there I'm probably not going to be using the cheap chafing dishes. And I'm going to have nice tablecloths on the table. So it really depends on the type of caterer you are. You may find yourself in the position to do both. So then you have to have both the nicer things and the less expensive things. So, those are kind of the basics. Other things to think about. What about transportation? Are you going to be an off-premise caterer, or are you going to do just catering here on site? It's kind of tough to turn away all that business that's out there in the world. So if I'm an off-premise caterer, I'm going to also have a way to get the food there. Trust me, from experience, I can tell you that putting food in the back of your car is not a good idea. Shortly after I moved to my current location, I'd done a catering involving macaroni and cheese with truffles, those black little French fungus things that are really smelly to begin with. But when that gets mixed with cheese and cream and gets underneath the carpet of your vehicle, and then tends to fester there over the summer and then continues to fester for about a year, it costs you about $1,000 to have the Jeep dealership pull all the seats out, pull out the carpet, re-clean everything, and you never get rid of that smell. All for a $500 catering of mac and cheese. So that was a losing effort there. But we may have to get refrigerated trucks. And refrigerated trucks, as you can imagine, are not cheap. Also, typically those trucks require people to drive them who have a CDL or commercial driver's license, which means you have to pay more for a driver there, by the way, as well. So, those are other things to think about. So, when we're putting this plan together of what we're going to do, you got to think, we go back to the beginning of Intro to Foods and the menu design class we had. What's your menu going to be? What is needed to cook, transport, hold, and reheat? The menu is once again going to drive the equipment just like it drives the staff, it drives everything. So we determine who we're going to serve by our menu, the equipment we're going to need, do we even need to truck it to places? Maybe we're just that, once again, an on-premise caterer. So, once we figure out our menu, we got to think about who's our target market. That's going to determine how nice of things we're going to have, how much we should have. I go back, I put a video a few weeks ago of Jugs Catering. Basically, they start at 50 people up to 5,000, and they drive the big semi-rigs around, and they do deep fried chicken all over the country. Obviously a different market than some of the other nicer caterers out there. It doesn't mean they don't do a good job, but you know, they have a certain target market. People who are at the Speedway drinking a lot, who wants to have barbecued meat or fried chicken. So we got to figure out who we're going to be serving. It might cause us to go back and look at our original mission statement. Maybe the answer to who we're going to serve or how we're going to do business might be in that original mission statement, which we talked about earlier, that kind of drives the focus. So, let's say we've kind of got an idea where we want to head with equipment. So now we're going to look at a couple things. First and foremost should be performance. All right, does this equipment do the job that I really need it to do? It's amazing how many times people buy equipment they don't need. One of the very first jobs I had out of culinary school was at this little restaurant in Wabash, Indiana. And the guy said, we want the best steakhouse in town. I thought, okay, this will be cool. He bought all the equipment before we planned the menu out from a friend of his. The equipment shows up. I had a flat top griddle, 3 deep fryers, and like a steam table. This guy thought that was going to give us the best steaks in town. And obviously it wasn't set up for that. So you need to make sure you can do what you need to do. I go back to the Jugs example again. If you're doing fried chicken in a deep fryer, and you've got a single basket deep fryer that takes 15 minutes to recover in between batches, can you feed 250 people fried chicken? No. So you've got to have a big enough model with a short enough recovery time that you can do the production that you need. Price should be another option. I mean, I'm sure we'd all like to buy the most expensive equipment in the world, although it's not always the best. But sometimes we have to stay in budgets. We look at the new kitchen we've built here. Price had to be a consideration. Although we ended up going with brand name items, it was very easy to see in some areas where we could buy something of a lesser quality because it just didn't matter. The sheet tray racks did not have to be a $500 sheet tray rack. It could be a $139 economy model. It works just fine. Style, another consideration. Is anyone going to see this equipment? Is this equipment that's always in the back, or is it going to be part of our display? Are people going to see this? Is it set the tone for the catering? Does this say who I am as a caterer? Obviously, the more style, we typically pay more money, but it's a consideration. Maintenance. You want to buy something that's easy to take care of, or you want to buy something you have to meticulously clean, take care of, pamper, just to make sure it works well. Chocolate fountains. Chocolate fountains are a horrible thing. They get globbed up, they're hard to work with. You get that much bang for a buck just so someone can stand there and spew chocolate all over themselves. I've never understood that piece of equipment. Way more trouble than they're worth. Employee skill level. Do you ever think we might buy a piece of equipment that the employees don't have the skill level to use? It's kind of funny because right now we've got a brand new oven across the way. About $14,000 for a combi oven, which is part steam, part dry heat. The owner's manual is basically about 4 inches thick. We have to have a certified person come in and show us how to use it. Will we be able to use it once they've gone through everything? Sure. But this equipment has changed so much since the first one I had. It really, we can't just go up and push a button and make it work. We literally can't because it has to be set up by a field technician before you can even use the thing. So employees having the right skill level are important. Current and future needs. If I buy something today, will it still be here in 5 years and still be relevant in 5 years, still do the job I needed to do in 5 years? If I buy, and we go back to that deep fryer situation again, if I buy this single bay deep fryer with a short recovery time, and today I'm doing hardly any deep fried items, occasionally I'm going to bread some shrimp or something, It's fine today, but if my business grows and expands and I want to start making this deep fried shrimp my signature item, or I'm going to do more and more, will that piece of equipment still do the job 5 years down the road? Applications and development of new technologies. We are constantly coming up with new things in the restaurant industry to use for equipment. This combi oven, once again, is one of those things that when it first came out about 10 years ago, everybody thought it was just a steamer, but now we can cook in multiple ways. It will cook one way with like moist heat, then switch to dry heat. It will hold the food. We can set different levels and put food at different heights in the oven and do different things. Crazy. Years ago we had a turbo oven. Turbo ovens you might have seen at Subway. They're usually the oven they put the little sandwich in to heat it up. Well, we had one of those ovens at a school I worked at before anybody knew what they were. And once again, we really didn't have a need for it at the time. Now I think it would be great to have one of these things because we could throw something in this little turbo oven. It will brown. Basically, we can make a bunch of pizzas up. We could throw those pizzas in the freezer, take one out, throw it in the turbo oven, hit a button, and in 2 minutes it's golden brown, piping hot, crispy on the bottom. That'd be a nice tool to have. So we're constantly going to see things changing. Government regulations is another thing. We've all heard of HACCP. HACCP is very critical for a caterer. If you're going to transport food from one place to another, back years ago when I was doing that for a school and we were doing a lot of food transportation, you had to take temperatures of food when it was being made, when it was packed, during transportation, when it arrived, when you reheated it, and when you sold it, or finally put it out on the table. So we had to have a lot of good thermometers. We had to have a lot of good equipment that held food at the proper temp. You can imagine how much record keeping we had to do there. But sometimes the government says you have to do this. Competition in response to your competitors down the road. So-and-so is doing this amazing display of flaming chicken. Whatever. I need to do one of these amazing displays of flaming food too. I need to get a display built. My competitor down the road is doing this gigantic boat of shrimp. He's got this big wooden boat. It is filled with ice and then packed with shrimp, and it is the big hit of all the company Christmas parties around. I need one of those too. I have seen one of those boats. They are cool, and I'd love to have one day for that very reason. But sometimes we need to buy things to keep up with other people that we're competing against. Innovation and product design. Sometimes the thing we had today, in 5 years, it's just outdated. It just doesn't do the job that it used to anymore. And while a lot of kitchen equipment will last forever, some things just don't stand the test of time. So we have to be ready for that. We also have to think about utilities. Is it a gas? Is it an electric situation? Is it both? Do I need 110, 220? Years ago, I was interviewing for a job in Indianapolis. One of the Indianapolis Pacer basketball players wanted to build a little steakhouse. And I was doing the interview with him and his attorney, going through this building they had already bought. It was going to be called Vern's. It was going to be the best steakhouse in Indianapolis. It's kind of a pattern with me, going to work for the best steakhouses. And so I asked Vern, his attorney, and I said, Mr. Fleming, how big is your charbroiler going to be? And he goes, charbroiler, what's that? I said, that big like outdoor grill thing, but it's inside to cook your best steaks in the city on? He goes, well, how's that work? I said, well, it's hooked up to the gas line. Blah, blah, blah. Well, we don't have gas. Okay, so you're going to make the best steak in Indianapolis on a George Foreman grill? It turns out they had not figured that they would need gas to run their equipment. It cost them $100,000 to tear up some streets in downtown Indianapolis to get gas to run to the building. They had to close streets down. You don't only do that if you're a professional basketball player, by the way. So once again, they didn't know really what they were doing. And style of service, and we kind of alluded to this right at the beginning. Are you going to be that fancy food person? Are you going to be that good old boy doing good old southern food that comes on a China plate? Those are things you've got to think about. So, now we figured out what equipment we want. Now we've got another big question. And that's, do we buy it? Do we maybe lease to purchase, or do we rent it? I put a couple videos of rental companies, as I might have mentioned before, under supplemental information so you can kind of see some things that are out there. It's funny, they're both from the UK. Don't ask me why. But you have to ask yourself, what are the advantages and disadvantages to, say, renting versus purchasing? And there's several there. One, when you rent, there's no storage needed. You can imagine if you are used to doing events for, say, 100 people to 1,000 people, how many different tables would you have to have? If each table roughly sits 6 people and you're doing dinner for 1,000, you need a bunch of tables. Plus the storage items you need to transport, the hot boxes and things. Your opening inventory for a catering operation like that would be huge, and the amount of money you'd have to spend would be just astronomical. So having to store things can be a real issue. If you just don't have the room, renting can be a good thing. No maintenance. I use it, I give it back. I don't have to pay for constant repairs or maintenance on a piece of equipment to make sure it's working and stays working well. So that's really great. Handling is minimal. I call, I say I need something, they bring it to me, I use it, they pick it up, they take it back. If I'm doing an off-site catering, they may even drop it off for me, which is a really nice feature. Rental companies usually will wash, rinse, sanitize, and put away all the product that you've rented too. I know in the past, whenever I've rented plates or dishes, usually we just scrape them off, put them in containers, rental company picks them up, and we don't have to deal with it anymore. So that saves wear and tear on your dish machine, it saves chemical costs, and of course saves labor as well, which is a big one. Special order items. We go back to the flaming chicken. Everybody's seen this flaming chicken display and everybody wants it. Fine. I can go ahead and, we don't usually carry that here, but I can get it for you, and then we pass those charges directly along to the customer. So somebody can get a special order item and it doesn't really cost you any more out of your pocket, and of course you're going to upcharge for anything that you rent, so you actually make a little bit more money on it anyway. Big one, no investment of capital. In other words, you don't have to go and put $5,000 out for new china every year when you can rent some. That can be a big thing because you need that money for marketing, for growing your business. Just putting it into china that you may or may not use each week, that's an awful lot of money. So saving that money is a good one. Another one I like is field testing. How do I know this is the plate I want? Is this going to be the right plate for all the different types of things I use? How do I know that this is the right gas burner, the portable burner that I can take out? Is it going to be wind resistant? Is it going to be hot enough? If I rent these pieces over a number of times, I can get to know what I like and if it's a really good piece of equipment, and then I can purchase it. So being able to field test is a great thing. I've already covered the space issue again, but once again, not having to hold all this stock, all this money. It's like food that you buy that you put on your shelf and you don't use. If it's just sitting there, it's not making any money. So we have to ask ourselves, are there any disadvantages to renting versus purchasing? And there are several. We see this one all the time. Rental equipment is not necessarily taken care of like it would be if you owned it. Perfect example, linens. We get linens all the time that have stains on them, they have holes in them, there's tears in them. I would never use these. If I had my own, I would never treat them like that. We actually do have our own linens, but I rent them because the washing time takes so much. But sometimes you'll get things with dents in it, with chips, plates that are faded, they're scratched. But that's, one of the advantages to catering or renting your catering equipment. You don't have to take care of it, but you also have to take what they give you, which is not always good. Last minute changes can be a problem if you're renting. Say you've got equipment rented, it's already been delivered, customer calls you and said, we need 50 more place settings. I've got to call the rental supply, I've got to try to get this down, I've got to try to maybe get another piece of equipment to cook this extra food. Last minute changes are very difficult when you rent your equipment. Unless you're right next door, it's usually going to take time to ship, you might have to do a purchase order, Who knows? But it adds definitely time to it. Sometimes you might have a certain thing that you do, flaming chicken, and it's your signature thing. And the catering companies, they may not have everything you need. So you need to have your own equipment so you can make a statement. So you've got that thing that makes you special. Finally, having to store items where you're waiting to use them can take away your small amount of storage space that you might have. So say I'm doing an event on Monday for 5,000 people. I'm not going to have my china come in on Monday, right? Because if there's a problem, I need to come in the day before. So I have my china come in Friday. Where do I store it? China for 5,000 is a lot to put up. So now I got to find a place to store the equipment while I'm waiting to use it. That can be a problem. Another one, and I've dealt with this before, and I'm going to deal with it again real soon. What happens when you've rented your equipment and you lose it? For example, what happens if you do a grand opening for a new building and all the linens that you rented are put into a bag, and that bag apparently is mistakenly picked up by maintenance and thrown into the trash? Well, we're going to see what happens when we tell the linen company that's what happened. We're probably going to have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to replace really crappy linens that had holes in it and stains in it with brand new linens because they were lost on our shift. So that's something that happens. So that's equipment in a nutshell. So you got to figure what's your menu, which is going to tell me who I'm cooking for, which is going to tell me what type of equipment I need. First part. Then you're going to have to figure out, do I want to buy? Do I want to lease? Do I want to rent? What are the advantages? Do I want to do both? I've been in all these situations. Years ago when I was at Ball State University, we had our own linen department. I could do any color of linens practically that you wanted and do any number of tables. I had more catering toys than you could shake a stick at. We had Dutson china at one of our catering venues, one of our student centers. Dutson china, my plates were $55 a piece. They were a 14-inch imported from England china that every time you dropped one, it was always a ruckus whenever you broke one of those plates. But we had dropped about $50,000 on china at the school. But it was an amazing thing, and we could serve thousands. Other places, we don't own a plate. We rent everything. You have a good rental company. Here we rent linens. We have our own plates. But there are times we've looked at actually renting other things because we have such a low inventory when we do some of the bigger dinners. And we want everything to match. So those are things to think about when you do your equipment. Just a little bit of cleanup here. Make sure you keep doing your discussion boards. We are coming into week 5, which means we're going to have about 3 more weeks, and we're going to have some type of midterm. I expect a short answer or essay midterm, so keep going over these lectures and keep reading the chapters in the book. I have posted one of the catering projects today online with an outline of what you're going to be doing. You'll actually be doing a presentation to me, the potential client, on why we should pick you as your caterer. There are some parameters on there that you're going to have to think about. You're going to have to give me a price. You're going to make some statements about serviceware, transportation, food safety. I've even given you a little example about Nanook of the North and his retirement party for you to start thinking about it and get an idea of what we're doing. Each one of you will get a different scenario, and they'll all be completely different with different issues and different problems that you're going to have to work through and think about how would I cater this event. All right. It's not going to be hard, but you're going to have to put some real thought to it. The second project is also going to be posted this week, and that second project is a little bit more. It's about running your own catering operation. I'm going to put some more information up on that, like I said, this week, and give you a little bit more idea of, basically, I'm going to start my own catering operation. I'm going to make a catering manual, how I'm going to run it. It's going to be that type of project. So that is going to be up this week. Take a look at that. Neither one of these should be done at last minute. So please start reading ahead. Please start planning ahead. You will notice that your projects are worth a lot more points than the test. I'm much more concerned with the projects than I am the written scores for the test. So ask questions, do your discussion board, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.